All right, we're going to start or pick up where we left off. After Lab 4, we successfully configured Squid Guard proxy, and we sort of made one of configuration settings for a proxy. Now we're going to go into the details or the problems that we exposed with that unique proxy setting. And it's kind of it was an older way of doing things. It's not recognized or done to the extent that it is done now. And I'll show you why here when we come through that here in a little bit. So the first thing we want to do is talk about what we're going to need. We're going to need to make sure our PFSense is still updated prior to PFSense Lab 4. Should have been when we did the Squid proxy. We're going to use Squid exclusively in this lab here, and we're going to install Squid if it's not already installed, and you should have some proxy knowledge what a proxy does. So for our main point here, let's go ahead and pull out my little laser pointer. All right, so our NAT interface VM virtual network interface gave our PFSense box in EM1's interface DHCP, and your IP address may be different than this, and that's okay. We did a DHCP to make it more universal. Internal to our NAT, or sorry, our net, which is eventually going to be NAT as well, we're taking EM2 and sending it through to our clients on site our network. So our Windows 10 is going to get a DHCP from EM2 at our 10.0.0.0/24 site or value. All right. So here's the problem. If you don't configure a proxy correctly, like we did prior, like this was the way it was done in the past, your employees at the Cool Site network first started, they didn't have any sort of monitoring or filtering software. They could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. Great for employees, not so great for managers or executives. So over the several months, management noticed a decline in productivity and increased in inappropriate web activity. The network team administrator implemented a proxy server that was designed to curb the browsing of youtube.com. That was Lab 4. It worked for a bit, the browsing habits returned. It's because SquidGuard was configured as a proxy server, and disabling that setting in the network connections or internet options, they were able to get around that. And you can just basically untick that little box, and then you get back to unfettered access, which is never something you want to give your employees or clients on your network. So we're going to start by checking our package, creating a certificate authority, changing or enabling local cache, and we'll actually get to see that in action. It's virtualized here on my machine, so it may be a little faster than, say, a live network or enterprise network, or production network is what they really call it. So we'll enable and configure our transparent proxy that does not allow the client to need to be configured, and it is basically making it so you cannot bypass it. And we're going to set LAN firewall rules to help us configure that transparent proxy. So we're going to take the firewall that's in place and we're going to flip it off. If you've been using, if you've been using snapshots in virtual machine, then you just go back in time to prior to Lab 4, where there shouldn't be anything enabled. As long as you have Squid and SquidGuard, if you have those two, you can just undo the settings you did, remove it from the access control list, remove it from any black lists that you may have in there for HCC or YouTube. So that could be one option for that. So we'll remove any prior rules that we had set, and we're primarily going after the time thief youtube.com traffic and site. We're going to use Squid to do that. So we'll make sure we block YouTube via the access control list and blacklist. And then we're going to test our proxies through a proxy tester called toolsvoid.com proxy test. And there are others out there, but I chose this one because it doesn't give you the IP address of your local machine or your host machine. So it's nice. We can make a test and not expose ourselves in our labs when we take our documentation steps and we prove that we've done these steps with your screenshots and various other things. So let's go ahead and get started on part 1 of lab. Pull out of this. All right, and that's for action 2, which we're not going to do just yet. We'll do that in another video, just to sort of keep this one a little shorter. Here we are in our virtualized settings. We have our PFSense Lab 2.4.2.4.4_2, or patch version 2. We have our Windows installation. Nothing really special about this Windows. It's just a browser, right? So we'll sign into this, and we'll pull this back to full screen. And so we have our services. We notice that Squid and SquidGuard are down. We have the ability to start them or restart and stop other services. For the most part, we're going to leave this as is. There's our picture logo that we just kind of added for fun a couple of labs ago. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at our certificate manager. Now, we don't have any certificates. Our Squid proxy server is down right now. And for the most part, it is set at default. You can kind of take a look at it as we go. And we'll go through and explain what each of these little sections do in a little bit more detail. We kind of touched on it last time. We're going to touch on it a little bit more this time. So no, sorry, that's remote. That would be things for like Sans NAS, but we're not using that right now. Here's our local cache, and everything else you can see is set as default. We're going to bump that a bit. Antivirus, this is really cool. Clam AV allows us to sort of set antivirus checks on our network interface, which is what everybody's connected to, the EM2. And we can exclude antivirus scanning of streamed video, which is really cool. We can enable Google Safe Browsing support. However, you might need to bump RAM. I can't remember what we have for RAM, but in a production network, this is a really awesome setting. Just make sure that your firewall has the appropriate amount of RAM to run that. And we have the database updates. And if we wanted to go for a region, and if we wanted to use optional antivirus servers. Again, our access control list for subnets, unrestricted IP addresses, web whitelists, blacklists, safe ports, our traffic management. So we can change the file size download that's maxed. We can do minimum, maximum uploads and downloads. We can throttle bandwidths. We can throttle specific extensions, binary files, images, multimedia files, other extensions. Now, authentication is really cool with local radius, LDAP, and captive portal, which we'll probably get into captive portal later. If you're familiar with lightweight directory access protocol or radius, you could also push your authentication over to those servers. Right now, we don't have any of those servers. It's not really what this firewalls class is designed to do. Here's our users list, our real-time filtering, and our logging. All right. For the most part, sync isn't going to do anything except package configuration syncing. If we have more than one firewall, if I make a change at firewall A, firewall B will sync up to firewall A's changes and so on. You can set how often that happens. But for the most part, we just have one firewall. That's all we'll really worry about. So let's take a look at our certificate manager. And we're going to start by adding our first cert. Right now we only have one certificate. That's the web configurator. If you look up here, we don't have a certificate in use at the moment because we're in HTTP. But if we decided to push over to HTTPS, we would be able to get a certificate. It would be valid from 2019 January to July 2024. We can make changes to it and look at it and view it. All right, so we're going to start by creating, okay, good. We're going to start by creating our first certificate. And we'll call this one just something generic, proxy certificate authority. We'll leave everything default for the most part. Our descriptive name and common name, we're going to make it the same just to make it easy for us to identify. We'll set our country code as United States. I am in Texas, so we'll set it in Texas and Houston. This doesn't have to be specific. poolsite.com, organizational unit, IT department. So if we understand organizational units, we understand how that works. We can also integrate it into our Active Directory structures as well. So once our certificate's created, we see that it is in place. There's our local Houston, certificate name, certificate authority, the site, US. If you wanted to make changes to it, if you wanted to export it or export the key or get rid of it all together because you made a mistake, that's all you can do. So now that our certificate's created, we'll go over to our service for Squid. And before we enable our proxy service, or proxy server, we need to just run a quick test first. Let's go ahead and do that. Just to show that we don't have any proxy in place. And hopefully it'll come up, tools void. So I've done it enough times, toolsvoid.com/proxy test. No proxy detected. Then here's how it figured that out. From all our headers, from all our HTML to all our OSI layers and all our packets, it determined that there's none of this information inside of it to pull out proxy information. All right, so that was just a quick test. The toolsvoid.com/proxy-test. So now we're going to go into our local cache because we don't have a remote server to host any cache. So we're going to just do local size. Now we're going to increase our drive size. Right now we're using 100 megs. Let's go ahead and make it 1,000 megs. That was 10,000. 1,000 megs or 1 gigabyte, or you could even do the original 1024, the real size. And there's a memory. There it is right there. So memory cache right now is using 64 gigs. We'll update that to 1024 gigs as well, or megs, 1024 megs, which is a gig. So we're going to help out this proxy server and our local cache and make our browsing a little faster. All right. So the maximum size in RAM is going to be 256 megs. And this is where we get our options to push in traffic management for dynamic cache and Windows updates. But we're not going to mess with that right now. It's just this is where you'd select that slot right there. So we'll make our changes. We'll save it. And as we go to websites like HCC, we can see how long roughly it takes to load the entire page. All right, and looks done. Okay. We go to things like msn.com. And I'm waiting for our circle to finish before I call the page completely loaded. Looks like it's done now. We'll go to yahoo.com. The only reason I'm going to these sites is because they're sort of large in the sense that they have a lot of individual graphics, individual little widgets, and all little sections, and done. All right, so all these little segments will stay loading as the page goes scrolling down or up. So we'll close out of these and we'll give it another shot here in just a second. So here's HCC's web page, and it may feel slightly faster. Let's wait. There, it's done. We'll give msn.com. I think I may have. Okay, good. Yeah. Done. It feels a little faster to me, but again, this is virtualized. It's not dealing with real-time network traffic. It's not dealing with production network woes. It is also dependent on what's going on my actual machine right now. So if Windows Update decided to update, it could possibly be taking a hit on that as well. So you see 23% memory, 15 CPU, 43 memory, 13 disk, 12 disk. That's on the this is on the virtualized machine right now. If we pull it back out, and we come to my host machine, 34 CPU, 42 memory, 2 disk, 73 GPU. But that's also because I'm running this capture software as well. So that's my high GPU. And also it's a laptop. It's not meant to be like a high graphics card for gaming or anything like that. So we'll pull us back to full screen. And this is sort of like an example, real-time example of how fast or how much a cached web server can help. And Yahoo seemed to look a lot faster this time. But I'm going to, again, wait for it to finish. All right, so now it's done. All right, so that's what a cache server does for your network. All right, first versus second, third, fourth. As we go on down the line, our cache will load and can continue. So we had it set for a gig of our hard disk size cache. That's how much is devoted to cache. And we had our memory cache size increase as well. So it helps out with that. And we can come over and we can see the impact that it has on our actual drive space, memory usage. So our drive space, we're only using 12%, memory 6%. But again, I only really have one client on here. So we do have an i7 6th generation, which could help if we wanted to maybe make this a more full-scale server. This probably would be a really good start and would last probably a really long time. So we'll go back to Squid Proxy. Now that we've done our local cache, it's time to actually start our proxy settings. So we're going to enable Squid Proxy. It's going to be proxying off our LAN interface, which is EM2 from our graphic from earlier. Let's go ahead and get rid of this before I forget. Proxy by default is 3128. All right. And we're going to enable transparent proxy. In order to enable transparent proxy, we needed that certificate authority. That's why we set it up earlier. So that's good. Let's go. We're going to leave it on LAN. And we're going to enable SSL filtering. And instead of doing splice whitelist bump otherwise, we're going to splice all. That way it's just a little easier. We don't have to worry about specific certificates and having to worry about SSL transferring our certificate from external to internal to the site. We just sort of take it all, and that's okay. It'll help prevent SSL errors as well on our internals. All right. Now we'll need to take our certificate authority right here, and that's our proxy-ca. That's what we created earlier. Everything else is going to stay as default. Our certificate daemon children, we're going to actually increase this because we'll actually see it in a little bit where you might have more than 5. So if we increase this to more than 5, that's just the maximum. And some websites have multiple securities because they have a lot of ads on them. And while we don't care about them, that may affect the page load and it may affect the handling of that. All right, so we'll also set up an access log. It's going to be stored in var squids logs. We're going to rotate them every 7 days. Now, if we wanted to have squid guard logs on our squid, we would make our check here. But when we do that, we're going to need to make sure we add into our iframe here the SIG error.php or squid guard error page. We need to add the reference to that squid guard error page in squid. So we're just going to basically keep this enabled and come back to that at a later date. All right, and here we are at our visible host name, the email, coolsite.com. The error language will be English. We'll forward our X forwarder headers. We're going to leave that on. And because I'm kind of strict about how I do this, you can and cannot you can do this and you don't have to do this. I like to do it because it doesn't tell much about your page. So we'll leave this off right now. We're going to see that squid error page with HTTP headers and HTML error pages, and we'll see what it says when it comes up, and we'll get to see a little bit more about it. But you can take this, check that, and it will suppress that HTTP page and just show it like error without a lot of information. So after we're good here, we've got our support email in here. We're going to go ahead and save it. All right, so all we've done so far is uh, we enabled our squid, of course. We pushed logging in place. Proxies default set at 31.24.28. We're allowing interface users on the interface. If you have HTTPS problems, here's a resolve DNS IPv4 first. You can do the DH, you can disable ICMP or your ping sets. Enable transparent proxy. That's going to go filtering SSL, which means we're going to need a certificate authority, which is what we already created. We'll set that in place lower down the page here. Transparent proxy is going to be in place on LAN. That was default setting. HTML SSL filtering, then we need to put that in and change it to splice all. Still on LAN. 3129 for SSL. Our proxy settings, or our certificate, was set here. And we upped our daemon children by 15, or the amount of certificates that can be passed through. Let's see, did I have a setting for remote cert checks? I think it should be set at allow any. No, that was remote sets. Oh, we already did the splice all. Sorry. Access logging. We're going to set our logs in place. If we wanted to change it, we could, but by default, that's where it goes. And our logs are going to rotate 7 days. Our host name, localhost, we can change that. I forgot we should have changed that to proxy server. Or maybe we'll set this as a squid proxy server. All right, so that'll show up on our error message, plus the email address, plus English. All right, so white space characters are stripped out. Request is denied, receives an invalid. URL is changed. The white space characters are encoded RFC 1738, and the job to the first white space. So we'll leave it as strip right now. All right, so now it is running. We can come over and take a look at our services again. We can see that squid is running. It's checked. So HTC comes up. Nothing's been modded to be ignored right now. We'll go back to our tools void checker. It says we're now using a proxy. We can see that it's squid. And we can see what's going on there. It is possible that I made the mistake here. So let's take a look at our rules. Yeah, see, I left it in place, so I need to go ahead and strip out some of these again and start this over. So I was a little sloppy with creating the snapshots. All right. So on our LAN side in our firewall rules, we have our LAN source, and it's going anywhere. What we want to do is we want to edit that from any, which is these stars, any. So we'll edit our IPv4. And we're going to change our destination from any to LAN. That's going to force all clients on the network to using our transparent proxy. All right. There's a possibility that you can get around it, but when you force everything on the firewall to go from LAN, instead of LAN to any, we're doing LAN. We're going to save our rule. We're going to apply our changes. All right. And we're going to monitor the full reload. Done. If you don't see done, the filter didn't reload, or the firewall filter rules did not load. So we need to make sure that that officially passed through. The LAN is what we're doing, from source to LAN. And from inside now, we are officially using our proxy server and the most intense purposes, almost impossible to get around. You can actually see it now at 10.0.0.5. There's squid. So now we want to start pushing in rules to get rid of people. And we would basically do the same thing we did from before. Inside squid, in access control lists, and we can ban or blacklist hccs.edu. And I think this was cache. So let's remove that cache real quick. There we go. So there's our squid error page. That's what we want to see. This is not stripped out, where we get full HTML stuff. So we can actually look at this page source. We can see everything that's HTML associated with that. You might be able to, if you're good at cross-site scripting, if you're good at HTML, if you're good at Java, you can see some information in here that you might not want to sort of give everybody to, right? There's our squid version right there. So if you wanted to do, say, maybe look up a squid exploit against it, you could. And again, we get to see a little bit of information on our support site, the access control protocol. Access control configuration prevents your request from being blocked. Provide your system provider if you feel this is incorrect. So what we can do now to sort of mitigate that and sort of hide it a little bit more, we'll go to general, I think, oh, we got to sign back in. Admin PFSense. Squid proxy. We'll suppress squid version string and HTML headers and HTML pages. All right, so there's HCCS. Says it's not secure because we didn't pull any certificates because it was already blocked. So we'll go to espn.com just to pull away from it and then go back to hccs.edu. That was my fault. All right, I think that is again cached internally. There's our squid version repress. Sometimes the page looks a little blank or bare. I've seen that happen a couple of times. It looks like this time I did do it in a nice graphically intensive way that it does sort of give the user a feel like maybe the network's not broken, you're just access denied, which is what we want it to show. So for the rest of the assignment, it's to get rid of YouTube. What I wanted to do is take our IP address for HCC's website and showcase a way to sort of try and get around this. And this is what we'll see right here. Because of our security certificates and an HCCS block, the certificate doesn't download. Now, if I had gotten this certificate prior to it, it might have potentially worked, but certificates do expire, and for the most part, HTTPS websites do show a certificate. And your certification path, we already have 3 certificates: DigiCerts, DigiCert SHA-2, and the Yahoo. So if we have possibly more than a bunch of, what do they call them? They call them widgets, where these little blocks in the middle here, that's widget 1, widget 2, widget 3, side widgets, weather widgets, scoreboard widgets, all these little, oh, and then the top bar as well. All of these little guys loaded in here. There could be possibly like a side one that might have another security certificate for whatever reason, and you could be at 4 and then 5, and then you're at the max. So that's why we bumped it to 15. So it's important to understand certificates. It's important to understand proxies and caching and how that assists the production network. So going back to our lab, the one that we're supposed to be doing, trying to grab my top bar here. All right. Uh, we removed SquidGuard. We disabled any rules and blacklists. I had some accidental firewall misconfigurations. Fixed it real quick. Reloaded our firewall. Made sure that finished loading. What's up to you now is to block YouTube via the access control list and blacklist, and then test your proxy using that tool's void proxy test. You can use others. If you do use others, make sure you block out your IP address. I don't want to know it. You shouldn't give it out anyways. That's like giving out your home address to weirdos on the street, right? You don't want to do that. Document your steps, and then that's what we're going to leave in place for the rest of the semester. We're going to leave our transparent proxy in place. In lab 2, we're going to pick up and we're going to add some more and go into more detail for that. So it's actually lab part 1, and then part 2 is the next one. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll come back and pick up for the rest of our blacklist stuff.